and doesn't have any flavor. So I don't know what the conversation's going to be when this thing does release. I don't know if it's going to get a lot of buzz. Match on Twitter and TikTok for a couple of weeks, or if it's just going to absolutely float under the radar and be forgotten immediately. But I was hoping for something impactful. Was anything but. 136, we got Night Patrol. This releases wide later on this month, and on paper, this could not have been a movie that appealed to me more. You got Justin Long in here, who for a long time I said was like an absolute beacon that this horror movie is going to be fucking wild and awesome. It's about corrupt LAPD police officers who are actually vampires. What a great concept. And this movie was abysmal. I mean, everything about it missed. It starts off interesting enough, but then it very quickly shows that it can't decide who its main character is. The person it eventually chooses to be the main character and focus of the movie is the least interesting and certainly least likable of the three characters. The commentary that it attempts to have is extremely heavy-handed and not insightful in any way. The vampirism is an absolute half measure. The reveals and directions it goes aren't surprising or interesting. It kind of turns into like a Green Lantern movie at some point. I'm not bullshitting. And if you've got a film that's trying to commentate on police brutality and the log line is literally defang the police, and you're going to try to attempt to make literal gang members the protagonist of a movie, you got a lot of heavy lifting to do, and they didn't lift shit. 135, The Astronaut, another film I saw at South by Southwest. You've got Kate Mara, who is an astronaut who was up at like a space station and crash lands back on Earth. And while she's in like this rehab facility while they're testing her and trying to figure out if she brought anything back with her, she starts to be stalked by what seems to be an extraterrestrial who has followed her back to Earth. Great premise. Really like the cast here. You got the great Lawrence Fishburne in here as her father. All the directions it went in the back half and all of its ultimate reveals did not work for me at all. 134, we have another film titled The Home. This is actually a foreign film that also takes place at a nursing home, believe it or not. I actually thought that Pete Davidson was like a very fast-tracked remake. It's not. This is a much better made film. It's genuinely got some creepy and unnerving moments and performances, but my God, is it slow and boring. And just when you think they're about to ramp things up and really pay off your patience in the third act, they don't. 133, one of the biggest disappointments of the year, and that is Wolfman. I am a Leigh Whannell fanatic. I love him as a writer and especially as a director. I didn't think there was any chance in hell that I was not going to love this film, and I just knew Leigh Whannell was going to shepherd in this brand new era of kick-ass werewolf films, and I was wrong. I was really fucking wrong. This is a movie that has an interesting enough spin on paper on typical werewolf lore, but really doesn't go anywhere with it. It is so restrained by its budget and its scale, being a very small, one-location film with a cast of characters that they really fail to totally get you on board with. It's got such a heavy-handed message about toxic masculinity and generational anger that it just fumbles completely. It never gets you on board with the main character actually being an angry person at all. And you're waiting all the time for like some kind of a werewolf action scene or werewolf transformation scene or something that's going to be like that Leigh Whannell signature element that he brings to everything. And it just never really comes. So I have to assume that this was probably a project he never really had his heart on. Maybe he did just to kind of fulfill his contract with Blumhouse. Absolute dud. 132, we got Snow White, the movie that arguably elicited the most online anger all year round, although there's like 4 or 5 other films that I could say the same thing for, so maybe it's not such a clear-cut winner there. But Snow White, probably the example of most incompetent high-budget studio filmmaking of 2025. Now, I did not despise this movie on the level that a lot of other people seem to or claim to. I didn't think that it was completely unwatchable. I don't really care much for any of these live-action Disney remakes, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions like Aladdin. But this is one that from the beginning, it just looked like Disney was out to make all the wrong decisions just to elicit some kind of controversy clicks. First, there was the controversy of casting a Hispanic woman to play Snow White, where the main description of the character historically is skin as white as snow. Never anything that would have offended me, but it did feel like you're just asking for a lot of trouble here. You also had the whole thing, which was much more offensive to me personally, which is them deciding, because Peter Dinklage got his nuts in a twist, that they're not going to have dwarves in a movie that has the most iconic dwarf characters of all time. So they were going to scrap the dwarves, replace them with magical creatures. That bred its own version of controversy, especially from the dwarf community, who were like, what the fuck, bro? Like, these are awesome roles that we've been waiting for our whole fucking lives. Peter Dinklage doesn't have to wait for these type of roles. Shut the fuck up. And then after that controversy got wild, they didn't decide to actually go back, reverse that decision, and recast and reshoot scenes with actual dwarf actors. No, they decided to use CGI dwarf characters. What the fuck? Then you had all the nonsense where Rachel Zegler, a very talented actress and infinitely more talented singer who on paper would be perfect for a Disney princess role like this, decided to use all the energy and all of her red carpet appearances to absolutely shit all over the original Snow White and Seven Dwarfs story that is obviously beloved, and most people who love it are the core audience and the target audience of the film that she is starring in. So needless to say, even if this was like a 5 out of 5 version of a live-action Disney remake, it was absolutely destined to bomb and be nothing but a controversy, clickbait type of thing that the internet was going to run over with a fucking truck for weeks. But the movie's just not very good. Like, there's elements of it that I think are fine and I think are charming, but it really feels like two different ideas. One trying to be beholden to the original, one trying to be something the original never was, and they just try to do both at the same time. Even have Gal Gadot in here, who I'm not nearly as hard on as everybody else. I like her in certain roles like Wonder Woman, but she's given a performance that does not match the rest of the movie at all. So you not only have an absolute dull movie that had no reason to exist whatsoever and is insulting that it cost the amount of money that it did, but you also have a film that unfortunately gives the very vocally anti-woke crowd all the ammo that they need to talk about it for another fucking year, and then you watch it and you go, yep. You guys got a point on this one. You got a point. 131, Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare. Now, I have obviously not been a fan of these public domain horror films and the universe movies, although they have been getting better. And this is one that I actually did have some inherent interest in. I thought that there could be some really cool potential with doing a very fucked up horror twist on Peter Pan lore. And I just felt like they didn't go anywhere near as far with the actual lore side of things as I wish that they did. And yet again, a movie that takes itself dead serious and is trying to be nasty and bleak and controversial rather than embracing any of the inherent silliness of this concept. And at 1:30, we got Bambi the Reckoning, a movie that really I could tie these two for different reasons. This one I had much lower expectations for, and it came closer to meeting those expectations, so I gave it the slight edge. It's a big CGI monster Bambi, killing people, ripping people's heads off. If that seems entertaining to you for 90 minutes, check it out. 129, we got Five Nights at Freddy's 2. I was actually a fan of the first film. Not like a wild fan. I thought it was fine. Definitely had its issues, but I saw a lot of potential for a cool franchise. I saw a lot of potential to have some nice generational, like, onboarding into the horror genre, like a nice little gateway movie franchise. And this sequel basically went back on everything that I thought it had potential to be. It became its most basic and worst version of itself. No storyline whatsoever, no meaningful character arcs. Even main characters from the first film get a complete backseat here. You got very tired and generic jump scares, and the thing just becomes an Easter egg hunt, which if you're a FNAF fanatic and you like that part of it, I get it. A lot of us aren't, so respect the fact that that pretty much kills any room to enjoy this movie. Oh, and also Blumhouse were pretty smug assholes about the reception of this film, so they can kiss my ass on this one. 128, we have The Surfer. Nicolas Cage yet again doing a very bizarre and weird independent film. Sometimes that absolutely hits, sometimes it's just a really weird and bizarre film. And for as much as I really wanted to enjoy this one, it really tested my patience. It really gave me a little bit of a headache with its constant gaslighting nature of the story, and the payoff by the end just wasn't worth the journey for me. 127, we have The Curse. This is a foreign film I saw at Fantastic Fest that is basically doing like The Ring or The Grudge, but putting a social media spin onto it. Has an incredible opening. The rest of the film does not measure up to. 126, we have Coyotes, yet another major disappointment for me from the man Justin Long. This is a film that has all the best ingredients, but doesn't know how to cook with it. The thrills and the scares aren't really that effective. The comedy and and the commentary here isn't that effective, and if that's not bad enough, the coyotes, the actual source of the tension and the fear and the horror in this movie, is some of the worst CGI or generative AI that I saw all year long. 125, you got Anaconda, a movie that had a great cast that really excited me, and a pretty interesting concept of doing like a meta Tropic Thunder type spin on the legacy of the original Anaconda, which is a guilty pleasure at best. And because they made it a PG-13 movie, I don't think any of the horror or the thrills or the action is all that noteworthy. And the comedy, which absolutely could have saved this movie for me, was just not well written at all. It seemed blatantly obvious to me that the writers just had like setups for scenes and were really hoping that these comedic talents were going to be able to riff and ad-lib something great out of all of them, and for me they didn't. 124, we got Love Hurts. This is like the latest attempt at taking the John Wick formula, having like a mild-mannered seeming guy with this rough past, and he's actually a bad motherfucker, and you cast somebody that we all love and are all enjoying his career resurgence in Ke Huy Quan, and this one just did not work whatsoever. There's a couple of good moments in the action. He actually is somebody that I think is very capable of doing movies like this, but I don't think his personality, his on-screen persona really matches this type of character. I never really bought into him being like this cold-blooded assassin with a badass past. And even the romantic angle that they very much geared towards Valentine's Day didn't really work out for me. 123, I Know What You Did Last Summer. Now, I am a casual fan at best of the first two films. That was like my formative era as a 90s kid, but I never really had a whole lot of faith or interest in doing a reboot. I was only excited about seeing Jennifer Love Hewitt and Freddie Prinze Jr. on screen again. And that was the thing that betrayed me most in this movie. Everything else is a pretty generic and lazy slasher as I expected it to be. The reveals really don't go anywhere interesting until you eventually do get to the very ballsy big swing that they take in the third act, which they did no work whatsoever to set up and establish and earn, and so it just comes across as insulting to fans of the original film. 122 Whistle. This is a film that's coming out in a couple of weeks. I believe it's a Shudder movie, but it is getting a theatrical release. This was the closing film of Fantastic Fest this year, and what a massive disappointment to close out the festival, because this is the Bye Bye Man, Ouija, tarot, just with a haunted whistle instead of cards, a Ouija board, or whatever the fuck.
The syndicate took a serious
There is one standout kill in this movie that is worth seeing it for, maybe. Everything else is things that you have seen done multitudes of times before and done better before. 121 Witchboard. This is the return of Chuck Russell, who is responsible for things like The Mask and Dream Warriors and the Blob remake from the 80s, movies that I love. This is not one of them. And the shame about this movie is that it has a really great idea in there that it only realizes for moments in the third act. You have this haunted witch board that ties back to this witch from like a century ago, and after about 2 acts of just the same generic haunted object type of horror movie that's very similar to Whistle, we've seen dozens of times before, you do get a moment where the lead actress, the main character and protagonist, switches lives and bodies with the evil witch from a century or so ago. Where is that movie? Because that's awesome. Do 3 acts of that. 120, we have Descendant. Now, this is another film I saw at South by Southwest, and you basically have a guy that looks into the sky and feels like he has been abducted by aliens and wakes up, and all these different things start to feel weird in his life that only affirm his suspicions that he has experienced an alien abduction. It's a very slow burn, and you're patient with the movie, hoping that eventually the third act is going to pay off your patience with some cool reveals or some kind of a twist or turn, and it just never really gets there. I was actually fine with this film until the final shot, which to me made things go ambiguous in a way that made no sense whatsoever. 119, you got 13 Days Till Summer, a movie that I thought was a pretty serviceable at best home invasion slasher that has a miserably bleak ending that kind of killed it for me. And the most interesting thing about this was that all throughout the Q&A after the movie, we were basically told this movie is never going to be released. You're the only audience who's ever going to see it. The people that funded this movie don't want it to see the light of day, and it's going to be a festival run before it disappears forever. Now, I've heard that there is like a foreign streaming service that actually has this movie out, so maybe they've gone back on that. But in all likeliness, this is a movie you're never going to see, and I don't think you're going to miss it. 118, we have Him. This is a movie that had a really interesting concept on its surface. It was produced by Jordan Peele, so of course you know there's going to be some very heavy social commentary in here. And visually, I think the movie looks really good, and Marlon Wayans gives a really great performance that I would like to see him do in other much better films. But this is a movie that is so surface level and so shallow with its actual commentary, you can literally grasp the entire concept from watching the trailer. 117, we got Until Dawn, yet another body to throw on top of the fucking sky-high pile of bodies of bad or disappointing video game adaptations. I really like the director here. I've enjoyed all of his movies before this, but as soon as you tell me we're not actually adapting the game, we're just borrowing the name and doing our own thing with it, to me, that is the kiss of death. And when I watched this film, those assumptions were absolutely affirmed. It's yet another movie where it's like a Groundhog Day thing. We're going to die in multiple ways, which does lead to some pretty fun, interesting, or at least somewhat entertaining death sequences. But the story itself, the characters, and all of the wasted potential of actually adapting some of the really cool elements that are in the video game, it just became a movie that was instantly forgettable. 116, we got The Smashing Machine, another pretty big disappointment this year. Very well shot. You've got a great performance from Dwayne "The Rock"